The bell of St. Francis Church tolled 6 times, echoing through the cobblestone streets still wet from the dawn's drizzle. Mary Ann woke up without having truly slept, her eyes burning from crying in silence so as not to wake her mother in the next room. The thin mattress on the wooden floor creaked when she stood up, barefoot, feeling the cold seep into the soles of her feet. Through the curtainless window, the sky was the color of lead, seeming to weigh down on the colonial rooftops of the town. She ran her hand over the black dress hanging on a nail in the wall. It was the only one she had left, the same one she had worn to her father's funeral 3 months ago, the same one she would wear today. The smell of mothballs mixed with mold clung to the fabric, frayed at the hem. Mary Ann closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to find something inside herself that resembled courage. She found none. There was only fear. A cold, visceral fear that rose from her stomach and tightened her throat until she could barely breathe. From her mother's room came the muffled sound of a dry cough, the kind that tears you apart from the inside. Mary Ann crossed the narrow hallway of the rented cottage where they lived now, so different from the estate where she was born, where she had grown up running through the fields and playing on the large, varnished wooden porch. All of that was gone. The estate, the lands, the cattle, the horses, her mother's jewelry, the mahogany furniture, the family portraits, all sold, auctioned, taken. And yet, it wasn't enough. Her father's debts were greater than the empire he had built. Gambling debts, cards, promises made in nights of whiskey and arrogance. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any emotional stories that will touch your heart. Mary Ann gently pushed open her mother's door. Mama Carolyn was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back curved, hands trembling as she tried to button her blouse. Her hair, once thick and black, now hung thin and gray over her gaunt shoulders. She was only 42, but she seemed to carry 80 years in her weary bones and dim eyes. "Let me help, Mama." Mary Ann knelt in front of her and began to fasten the small buttons with fingers that also trembled. "Today is the day." Mama Carolyn's voice came out weak, almost a whisper. "Today is the day," Mary Ann repeated, for there was nothing else to say. "I shouldn't let you go alone. You aren't in any condition to walk to the square, and I won't be alone. Old Silas is going with me." Old Silas was the only one left, the old foreman of the estate, who had served Mary Ann's father for 30 years, and even without pay for months, had not abandoned them. He slept in a corner of the small room he shared with the 2 women, on a mat on the floor, and left before sunrise to do odd jobs at the market, carrying sacks of flour and crates of potatoes to earn a few coins for bread and coffee. Mama Caroline held her daughter's face with both hands. Her palms were rough, cracked, hands that once knew only lace gloves and rose water. "Forgive us, my daughter. Forgive your father. Forgive me for not stopping it." "There is nothing to forgive, Mama," Mary Ann lied, because it was easier than admitting the hatred that sometimes bubbled inside her when she thought of her father. The man who had thrown everything away, who had destroyed not only his own life, but theirs as well, who had died without apologizing, without trying to fix it, leaving only a trail of debt and shame. Mary Ann stood up, smoothed the black dress she had already put on, and pinned her hair into a tight bun at the nape of her neck. She didn't look in the mirror. She didn't want to see her own face. She didn't want to see the 19-year-old girl who in a few hours would be placed on a wooden platform in the public square before the entire town to be offered as payment for a debt. That wasn't what they called it officially. There was a nice, pompous name the men of law used: Debt Settlement Agreement, via domestic service. But everyone knew what it really was. An auction. Of a person. Of her. The sun was higher when Marianne and old Silas left the cottage and began to descend the stone streets toward the center of town. The old foreman walked beside her in silence, his dirty straw hat in his hands, eyes on the ground. Every now and then he would huff, as if he wanted to say something, but swallowed the words before they could come out. The streets of St. John were a maze of worn cobblestones, colonial mansions with their wrought iron balconies, old churches on every corner, and that smell that belonged only to this place, a mixture of roasted coffee, horse manure, church incense, and bread coming out of bakery ovens. Marianne knew every stone of these streets. She had played here as a child, walked arm in arm with friends on Sunday afternoons, watched processions and festivals. Now, each step seemed heavier than the last. What city are you watching from? Comment down below. When they turned the corner onto Main Street, Marianne began to hear it. The murmur. Voices. Many voices. Her stomach churned. The square was full. Of course it was. It was the event of the year. The Miller daughter, from a traditional family being auctioned off like livestock. How many times would this story be told and retold in bars, on porches, in gossip circles? How many times would her name be used as an example of decadence, of divine justice, of pride coming before the fall? Don't look at anyone, old Silas murmured beside her. Keep your head up. You are a Miller. Don't forget that. But what good was being a Miller now? The name that once opened doors was now a joke. The surname that once inspired respect now brought only looks of pity or mockery. Independence Square stretched wide in front of St. Francis Church. In the center, they had set up a wooden stage with 3 steps leading up to a platform. There, on top, was a podium where the auctioneer would stand, and beside it, a stool. For her, Marianne felt her legs wobble. Old Silas held her by the arm. Strength, girl. Around the square, dozens of people. Men, mostly. Farmers from the surrounding areas, city merchants, the curious. Women, too. Some hiding behind their husbands. Others, more shameless. Arms crossed, chins up, judging. Marianne recognized some faces. Mrs. Sebastian, who had been her mother's friend. Now she looked away. Mr. Tanner, who had dined at their house so many times. Now he smiled from the corner of his mouth, a crooked, malicious smile. And so many others, acquaintances, neighbors, people she greeted at Mass, all there to see her humiliation. On the platform, Magistrate Godfrey was already positioned with his papers and his shrill voice. He was a short man, with a thin mustache and round glasses reflecting the morning light. Beside him, the creditor's lawyer, Mr. Jenkins, a fellow tall and thin as a rail, in a black suit and a tie tight around his neck. Miss Marianne Miller. The magistrate's voice cut through the murmur. Please, step up. Please. As if she had a choice. As if this were a polite invitation and not an order, a sentence, a public execution of dignity. Marianne let go of old Silas's arm and began to climb the steps. Each one creaked under her feet. Up there, the entire square opened up before her. So many eyes, so many faces, all looking, measuring, evaluating, calculating how much she was worth, or rather, how much debt she could cover. The sun hit her eyes, and she had to squint. The magistrate began to read aloud that rehearsed legal text, full of heretofore and whereas, and it is established. Marianne didn't pay attention to the words. She only heard the buzzing in her own head, her heart beating so hard it felt like everyone could hear it. Okay, the previous passage already contains. The previous passage already contains. The previous passage already contains. From 19 years of age, single daughter of the late Anthony Miller and Caroline Miller, shall be handed over into a regime of domestic service for a period of 10 years, totaling $23,000. All of that would be spent in a stranger's house, serving, working, at the mercy of whoever paid the most. We now open the bidding. Who gives the first bid? Silence. For a second, Marianne felt an absurd hope. What if no one bid? What if everyone went away and she could step down and be free? 10,000, a voice shouted from the back. Marianne recognized it. Mr. Malachi, owner of a store on the outskirts of town. A fat, sweaty man with a reputation as a drunkard and a heavy hand. Hope died. 10,000 recorded. Does anyone give more? 12,000, another voice. Colonel Abraham from the next valley. Widower. Must have been about 60. Had children older than Marianne. 12,000. Does anyone offer more? 15,000. Mr. Higgins, the fabric merchant. Married. 5 children. Marianne felt bile rise in her throat. The bids continued. 17, 19, 21. Each number shouted was like a slap in the face. Each voice belonged to someone who saw her not as a person, but as a thing. Merchandise. Property. Marianne kept her eyes fixed on a distant point. Beyond the square, beyond the mountains, trying not to be there. Trying to detach from her own body, float away to any place that wasn't that accursed platform. 22,000. We have 22,000. 22,000, going twice. The silence that followed was heavy. 22,000 still didn't cover the full debt. It was short by 1,000. What would happen? Would they take her mother's furniture? The last clothes? Or worse, extend the time of servitude, 15 years instead of 10. 22,000 going third, 50,000. The voice came from the side of the square, deep, firm, and so low it was almost unheard, but it was heard. The entire square went silent suddenly, as if someone had snatched the sound from the world. 50,000. More than double the debt. More than double the last bid. Marianne turned her head toward the voice and saw him. Colonel August Stone was standing by one of the old lampposts in the square. Tall, broad-shouldered, but stooped as if carrying an invisible weight. Dark suit. Wide-brimmed hat hiding half his face. He must have been about 50, maybe more. Gray beard, well-trimmed. Large, calloused hands, which now gripped the brim of his hat with a force that made his knuckles white. He didn't look at Marianne. He looked at the ground. But his hand, that right hand that had raised to make the bid, was trembling. It trembled visibly, like a leaf in the wind. The entire square seemed to have stopped breathing. Colonel August was known, yes, but as a distant, mysterious figure. He lived alone at the St. Helen estate, on the outskirts of town. He didn't attend parties, didn't go to mass, didn't participate in anything. They said he had been a widower for many years. They said he was an executioner, hard on his employees. They said many things, but no one really knew him. And now he was there, with a trembling hand raised, offering a fortune. 50,000, the magistrate stammered, incredulous. Colonel August, do you confirm the bid of $50,000? The colonel finally raised his face, and for the first time, Marianne saw his eyes. They were dark, deep, and carried something she couldn't identify at the moment. It wasn't desire. It wasn't greed. It was something heavier, more ancient. something that seemed to hurt. "I confirm," he said, and his voice came out cracked, as if it hadn't been used in a long time. Does anyone give more than 50,000? The magistrate looked around, but it was obvious no one would. It was absurd, too generous, too suspicious. 50,000 going once, 50,000 going twice, 50,000 going 3 times, and sold, won by Colonel August Stone. The gavel on the podium echoed like a gunshot. Marianne felt her knees give way. Old Silas ran up the steps to support her before she fell. The murmur exploded in the square. Everyone talking at once, commenting, speculating, wondering what it meant. Marianne looked again at Colonel August. He was already turning his back, walking away, disappearing among the people. But before disappearing completely, he stopped for a second, turned his head slightly, and looked at her one more time. And in that look, Marianne saw something that scared her more than anything else on that terrible morning. She saw tears. Tears in the eyes of a man no one had ever seen cry. Tears from a man who had just bought 10 years of her life for a price that made no sense. And Marianne knew, with a certainty that chilled her spine, that there was something much bigger behind that bid. Something she didn't yet understand. Something that somehow was linked to her father, to her family, to secrets buried a long time ago. But what could it be? Why was that man trembling? Why did he pay so much? And why, when he looked at her, was there pain in those eyes and not triumph? The question swirled in Marianne's head as old Silas helped her down from the platform. The magistrate was already preparing the papers. Lawyer Jenkins counting the notes the colonel had left with a representative. Everything happening too fast, too official, too real. In a few hours, Marianne would have to pack her bundle with her few clothes and head to the St. Helen estate, to the house of a man she didn't know, to a life she hadn't chosen, to a destiny that was sealed, signed, stamped. And as she crossed the square back home, feeling the stairs digging into her back, Marianne made herself a promise. She would survive, no matter what, no matter how. She would keep her dignity. She would keep her head up, because she was a miller, and millers did not bow, even when the whole world conspired to break them. The wagon creaked all afternoon along the dirt roads between the town and the St. Helen estate. Marianne sat in the back, clutching the cloth bundle that contained everything she had left in the world. 2 patched dresses, a slip, a pair of darned stockings, a tortoiseshell comb that had been her grandmother's, and the wooden rosary her mother had pressed into her hands at the moment of farewell. Mama Caroline couldn't stop crying. She held her daughter's face, kissed her forehead, asked for forgiveness one more time, and then turned her back and went into the cottage because she couldn't bear to watch her daughter leave. The wagon driver was a middle-aged man named Joshua, an employee of the colonel. He didn't speak much. He only answered with grunts or nods when Marianne tried to start a conversation. The colonel hadn't come to pick her up personally. He had sent only the man, the wagon, and a note, written in a firm, almost violent hand. Joshua will pick up the young lady at 3 o'clock. Bring what is necessary. A. Stone. No greeting, no kind word, just dry orders. Marianne crumpled the note and threw it on the floor of the wagon. Then she regretted it, picked it back up, and shoved it into her dress pocket. She didn't know why. Maybe because it was the first thing she received from the man who now, in a way, was her owner. The word disgusted her. Owner. But that was it, wasn't it? No matter that the paper said provision of services, no matter that they used pretty words and official stamps, the naked truth was this. She had been bought, sold, like a sack of corn, like a head of cattle. For 10 years, her life was no longer hers. The sun was beginning to set when the wagon turned onto a road lined with ancient oak trees. The trees formed a kind of green tunnel, branches meeting overhead, filtering the orange light of the late afternoon. The smell of earth and grass changed, became denser, mixed with the aroma of crops and stables. In the distance, Marianne saw the estate gate. 2 high posts of dark wood holding a crossbeam carved with St. Helen Estate, 1891. Joshua got down, opened the gate, led the wagon through, and closed it all up again. From that point on, the road improved. Less bumpy, with white pebbles on the sides. Well-kept wooden fences divided the pastures where cows grazed peacefully. Further ahead, vast fields stretched up the hill, the rows perfect, waiting for the harvest. It was a prosperous farm. That was evident. Very different from the decaying properties Marianne had seen in recent months, including her own family's farm before it was taken. Here, everything breathed order, work, discipline, and silence. A heavy, almost oppressive silence. The main house appeared after a curve. It was an old construction, colonial style, 2 stories, with wide porches supported by thick wooden columns. The walls were white, freshly whitewashed, and the windows had those dark green wooden shutters. A garden in front, half abandoned, with rose bushes growing wild, and a stone fountain in the center, dry. The wagon stopped in front of the porch steps. Joshua got down, took Marianne's bundle, and placed it on the ground. Then, for the first time, he looked at her properly. "The colonel is in the study. Hattie will receive you." And he turned his back, taking the wagon away toward the rear, where the stables and employee houses must be. Marianne stood there, holding her bundle, looking at the door of the house. She didn't know if she should knock, enter, wait. She decided to climb the steps. The porch boards were clean, but worn by time. She reached the door and raised her hand to knock, but before her knuckles reached the wood, the door opened. A black woman, tall, about 60 years old, with a white kerchief tied around her head and a simple calico dress, stared her up and down. Her face was hard, but not cruel, just tired, as if she had seen a lot in life, and nothing surprised her anymore. "You're the girl from the auction, right?" The voice was direct, no nonsense. Marianne swallowed hard. "I am. Marianne Miller. I am Hattie. I cook, clean, and take care of this house since the world began. Come." She didn't wait for an answer, turned her back, and went inside. Marianne followed. The interior of the house was dark, even with the afternoon light still coming through the windows. The walls were covered in dark wood paneling, and the floor creaked under every step. There was antique, heavy furniture, and a smell of beeswax mixed with something older, sadder. The smell of a house where no one has laughed in a long time. Hattie led her down a hallway to a wooden staircase that led to the 2nd floor. "Your room is up there, 3rd door on the right. I left water for you to wash and a change of clothes on the bed. The clothes are from before, but they should fit." "From before?" Marianne asked. Hattie stopped in the middle of the stairs and looked back. Her eyes met Marianne's, and there was something there. A warning? An old pain? Too many questions aren't welcome in this house, girl. Learn that quickly. You are here to work, not to pry. Marianne felt anger rise. "I didn't ask to be here. And I didn't ask if you asked. It is what it is. Now go up, clean yourself, and come down to the kitchen when it gets dark. There is work waiting." And she continued climbing without looking back. Marianne pressed the bundle against her chest and climbed the steps, feeling every creak like a lament. The second-floor hallway was even darker. 3 doors on each side. The third on the right was ajar. She pushed it slowly. The room was small but clean. A narrow bed against the wall. A nightstand with a basin of water and a ceramic pitcher. A straw chair and a trunk in the corner. The window looked out to the back of the house, to the fields climbing the slope. On the bed, as Hattie had said, was a folded change of clothes, a simple work dress of thick fabric and an indefinite color between beige and gray. Marianne closed the door, dropped the bundle on the floor, and sat on the bed. The springs groaned. She covered her face with her hands and finally allowed the tears to come. She cried in silence, her body trembling, her throat burning from holding back so much. She cried for the sick mother she had left behind. She cried for the life she had lost. She cried for the humiliation of the morning. She cried for being there, in that strange house, under the roof of a man she didn't know, and who had bought her as one buys a sack of salt. If you are feeling the pain of this story, leave a like to show you are with Marianne on this journey. When the tears dried, Marianne stood up, took off the black dress she had worn all day, washed her face and arms in the cold water of the basin, and put on the clothes that had been left for her. The fabric was rough against her skin, but it fit well, almost perfectly in fact, as if it had been made for someone her size. She looked at the old clothes she had taken off and folded them carefully, storing them in the trunk along with her bundle. Then she pinned her hair in a tight bun and went down. The kitchen was at the back of the house, a large room with a wood stove lit, iron pots hanging on hooks on the wall, and a long table in the center. Hattie was there, stirring something in a pot that sizzled and released steam. The smell of stew filled the air, mixed with frying bacon. "Take that knife and start chopping the collard greens." Hattie pointed to a board where there was a bunch of green leaves. Marianne obeyed. She picked up the knife, which was sharp and heavy, and began to cut the greens into thin strips. Her hands moved automatically. She had learned to cook in recent months, when they had no more servants, and her mother was too sick to do anything. Hattie watched out of the corner of her eye. "You know how to cook, then?" It wasn't a question. "I learned out of necessity. The best teacher there is." Hattie took a wooden spoon and began to stir the beans. "You're going to work here in the house. Cleaning, cooking, sewing, whatever is needed. The colonel doesn't receive visitors, so it's not much work. It's just me, you, Joshua outside, and the colonel." "He is," Marianne hesitated. "Is he very demanding?" Hattie took a while to answer. She continued stirring the pot, her face illuminated by the fire of the stove. "The colonel is a fair man. Hard, but fair. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't raise his hand. But he doesn't smile either. He doesn't talk. He lives locked in his office or in the fields. He eats his meals alone, in the office, not at the table. He doesn't like noise. He doesn't like questions. Why did he buy me?" Marianne dropped the knife and stared at Hattie. $50,000. It's much more than the debt was worth. Why? Hattie turned her face, and there it was again, that flash of something. Pain? Pity? "I already told you, girl. Questions are not welcome here. But I need to know. Did he know my father? Is there something enough?" Hattie's voice cut the air like a razor. "Do you want to survive in this house? Then stop asking, stop poking, and do your work. Understood?" Marianne held the older woman's gaze. She saw there not a threat, but a genuine warning. Fear? Protection? She didn't know, but she nodded. "Understood. Good. Finish the greens. Then take the tray to the study. He dines at 7 sharp. Knock on the door 3 times. Wait for him to say enter. Leave the tray on the small table next to the door and leave. Don't look at him. Don't speak to him unless he speaks first. Understood? Understood. The clock in the hall struck 7. Hattie set up a wooden tray, a deep plate with the stew, 2 pieces of sausage, cornbread, sautéed greens, and a cup of black coffee. Everything simple, hearty, well-made. She handed the tray to Marianne. Go. The study is the first door on the left in the entrance hall. Marianne held the tray, feeling the weight and heat rising up her arms. She crossed the kitchen, the hallway back, to the door Hattie had indicated. It was a solid wood door, dark, with an old iron lock. She took a deep breath. Knocked 3 times. Silence. She knocked 3 more times. Enter. The voice came from the other side. Deep, muffled. Marianne turned the knob and pushed the door. The study was a room lined with books. Shelves from floor to ceiling, filled with old volumes with leather spines. A huge desk dominated the center, covered in papers, an inkwell, quills, a lit oil lamp casting dancing shadows on the walls. And behind the desk, sitting in a high-backed chair, was Colonel August Stone. He didn't look up. He was writing something, his hand moving firmly over the paper. Marianne stood in the doorway, holding the tray, not knowing exactly what to do. Hattie had said to leave the tray on the small table next to the door. She looked. There was a small table there, yes, low, empty. She walked to it, slowly, trying not to make noise, and placed the tray. Marianne Miller. The voice made her body freeze. She hadn't heard him look up, but now she knew he was looking at her. She turned slowly. Colonel August had his eyes fixed on her. The dim light of the lamp accentuated the deep lines in his face, the shadows under his eyes, the gray beard covering his cheeks. He was a big man. That was clear, even sitting down. Broad shoulders, large hands that now held the quill like one holds a weapon. And those eyes, dark, piercing, but also tired, infinitely tired. Yes, sir, she replied, her voice coming out weaker than she intended. Sit. Excuse me? Sit there. He pointed to a chair facing the desk. Marianne hesitated. Hattie had said not to speak to him, to leave the tray and go. But now he was giving an order, and she couldn't disobey. She walked to the chair and sat on the edge, hands folded in her lap, back straight. The colonel observed her in silence for a long moment. So long that Marianne began to feel exposed, dissected. What did he see? What was he looking for? Finally, he spoke. Can you read? The question caught her by surprise. Yes, sir. My father hired tutors. Right? Also. Do arithmetic? Yes. He nodded, as if that confirmed something. Then he leaned back in the chair, which groaned under the weight. I am going to tell you a few things, Miss Marianne, and you are going to listen without interrupting me. Understood? Yes, sir. You are here because I paid your debts. But you are not here to be my slave. You are not here to be used. The last word came out with a special weight, almost with disgust. You will work in this house. You will be treated with respect. You will have decent food, a clean room, adequate clothes. You will receive a monthly wage, small, but yours. In 10 years, when the agreement ends, you will leave here with enough to start your life over. Marianne blinked, confused. That made no sense. No sense at all. But why? I said no interruptions. His voice hardened, but did not become cruel, just firm. There is a reason why I did what I did. A reason that does not concern you directly, but rather your father, the past. Debts that are not of money. He stopped, ran his hand through his beard. the gesture heavy. One day, perhaps, you will know the whole truth. But not today. Today you only need to know that you are safe here. No one will touch you. No one will humiliate you. You have my word. The word of a man who bought me at an auction like an animal. The words slipped out before Marianne could hold them back. The anger, held back all day, finally poured out. How can I trust anything you say? The colonel didn't get angry. On the contrary, something in his eyes changed, became softer, sadder. You can't. I understand. But time will show. Actions are worth more than words. And my actions from now on will speak for me. He stood up, and Marianne was startled by his height. He must have been over 6 feet tall. He walked to the bookshelf, picked a book, thumbed through it without really reading, and put it back. Your father and I, we had a history. Many years ago, before you were born. A history that changed both lives, his and mine. And when I heard he had died, that you were in misery, that you would be auctioned, his voice trembled. For the first time, it trembled. I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't allow it. Why? Marianne stood up too, her hands clenched into fists. What did my father do? What happened between you? The colonel turned his face, looking out the dark window where only his own reflection could be seen. Your father saved the person I loved most in the world and destroyed my life in the process. And I spent 30 years hating him for it, and also thanking him. It's complicated. Marianne felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something gigantic there, buried, hidden, something that explained everything. The absurd bid, the trembling hand, the tears in the square, the strange kindness now. Who did he save? The colonel closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were moist. That you will discover, but not now. Now, go rest. Tomorrow starts early, and Marianne, he looked her in the eyes. Welcome to St. Helen, and I am sorry. I am sorry for everything. Marianne didn't know how to respond. She nodded, turned her back, and left the study. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart racing. What had just happened? Who was that man? What had her father done? And who was the person he had saved? The questions spun in her head as she climbed back to her room. She changed her clothes, lay down on the narrow bed, pulled the thin blanket up to her chin. Through the window, she saw the crescent moon in the sky and heard the sounds of the night, crickets, an owl in the distance, the wind in the trees. Could you live in that era, in a situation like this? Comment below what you would do. She closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. How could it? Everything was too strange, too mysterious. And the worst part, or perhaps the best, was that Colonel August Stone didn't seem to be the monster she had imagined. He seemed to be a broken man, a man with remorse, a man carrying secrets so heavy they bent his back and extinguished any light in his eyes. Marianne turned in bed and looked at the trunk door in the corner. Tomorrow, when she had courage, maybe she would open it. Maybe she would find clues. Because if there was one thing she had learned on that terrible and strange day, it was that the St. Helen estate kept secrets. Secrets about her father, about the colonel, and perhaps, in some impossible way, about herself. And she was going to discover the truth, no matter how long it took. Because Marianne Miller was not just a survivor, she was a Miller, and Millers never gave up. The first days at St. Helen Estate passed in a strange, almost unreal rhythm. Marianne woke up before the sun rose with the rooster's crow, washed her face in the icy water of the basin, put on the same work dress, and went down to the kitchen where Hattie was already lighting the stove fire. Together, they prepared breakfast. Homemade bread, butter, cheese, jams, strong coffee brewed fresh. Marianne set up the Colonel's tray. Always the same thing. Black coffee, 2 slices of bread with butter, nothing else, and took it to the study door. She knocked 3 times, heard the muffled enter, left the tray on the small table, and left without looking at him. But she felt it. She felt his eyes on her. She felt the weight of that gaze every time she entered and left. It never lasted more than a few seconds, but it was enough to feel the air become denser, heavier, as if there were 1,000 unspoken words floating between them. After breakfast, it was time to clean. The house was too big and silent for so few people. There were rooms on the 2nd floor that were never used, covered in dust and cobwebs. Hattie forbade her from entering 2 of them. Those stay locked, don't touch, and Marianne obeyed, but curiosity gnawed inside. What was in there? Why were they locked? What secrets did they hold? Afternoons were spent in the kitchen, preparing lunch and dinner, washing clothes in the tank out back, hanging them on the line under the hot March sun. Marianne learned quickly. Hattie was demanding but fair, teaching with patience when she saw genuine effort, and gradually, the 2 began to talk. Not much. Hattie wasn't one for many words, but small things. Comments about the weather, about the harvest approaching, about how to make the stew just right. One afternoon, while beating clothes in the tank, Marianne gathered courage. "Hattie, can I ask you a question?" The older woman didn't stop scrubbing. "Depends on the question. Did you know the Colonel's wife?" Hattie's hands stopped for a second, just a second. Then they continued, but slower. "I knew her." "What was she like?" Silence. The sound of water, soap, hands working. Then, beautiful, delicate. Too much for this hard world. Hattie's voice had something different now. Sadness, longing. She didn't live long, got sick fast. From what? Of the heart, of the lung, of the soul, I don't know. Sometimes people simply give up living. Hattie wrung out the clothes with force, water running between her fingers. And when she died, the Colonel died with her. The body kept walking, working, breathing. But the real man was buried with her. Marianne felt a squeeze in her chest. How long ago? 22 years. I was here when it happened. Saw everything. Saw him carry her coffin on his shoulders to the cemetery up on the hill. Saw him dig the grave with his own hands, even having 10 men to help. And then he never went there again. Never. Not once in 22 years. Why? Hattie finally looked at Marianne. Because it hurts too much. Because there's guilt mixed in there. Guilt for what? I don't know. But there is. He carries that guilt like a cross on his back every single day. Marianne wanted to ask more, but something in Hattie's face said the conversation was over. They went back to work in silence, but the words kept echoing in Marianne's head for the rest of the day. Guilt. Of what? What relation did this have with her father? With the bid at the auction? With everything? Nights were worse. Marianne lay in the narrow bed and listened to the sounds of the house. Wood creaking, wind in the windows, and sometimes, down below, coming from the study, the muffled sound of footsteps. The Colonel walking back and forth, for hours. She imagined him there, alone, surrounded by books and papers and ghosts. What kept him awake? What tormented that man? In the second week, something changed. Marianne was dusting the living room when she heard the study door open. She turned and saw the Colonel standing there, looking at her. It was the first time they saw each other outside of meal deliveries. He was wearing work clothes, thick pants, a long-sleeved shirt, with sleeves rolled up to the elbows, showing muscular and tanned arms, hat in hand. "Good morning, Miss Marianne." His voice came out formal but not cold. "Good morning, sir," she replied, holding the dust cloth tightly. "Are you adapting well to the routine?" "Yes, sir." "Is Hattie treating you with respect?" "She is, yes." He nodded. He stood there a moment longer, as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how. "Then, if you need anything, you can speak to Joshua or Hattie, or me, if necessary." "Thank you, sir." "And Marianne." He took a step forward. The morning light entered through the window and hit his face, revealing every wrinkle, every mark of time. "How is your mother?" The question caught her off guard. She is with her friend, Mrs. Inez." "Who offered to take care of her? Does she need medicine? A doctor?" Marianne blinked, confused. "She does, but speak to Hattie. She will give you money. Send for a doctor. The best medicines there are. And if your mother needs to stay in a better place, more comfortable, we will resolve that too." I don't understand. Why?" The colonel looked at the floor. "Because she isn't to blame for anything. Because she has suffered enough. And because—" He raised his eyes again, and Marianne saw it again. That ancient, deep pain. "Because I have debts, and some of them are with your family, even if you don't know it." Before Marianne could respond, he put his hat on his head, turned his back, and walked out the front door. She stood there, the cloth forgotten in her hands, trying to understand. Debts with the family. What did that mean? Did her father owe the colonel, or was it the other way around? And if it was the other way around, why was she here working instead of— The questions had no end. That afternoon, Hattie called Marianne into the kitchen and handed her a thick envelope. "For your mother's doctor, and for the medications. The colonel sent it." Inside was more money than Marianne earned in 3 months of work, when the family still had the farm. "Hattie, I don't understand any of this." The older woman sighed, sat on a chair, and motioned for Marianne to sit too. "Listen, girl, I don't know everything, but I'm going to tell you what I know, because you deserve at least that." Marianne sat down, heart racing. "The colonel and your father were friends, a long time ago, before you were born. Real friends, the kind who trust each other with their lives. They were young, worked together, even had plans to unite the farms one day. But then something happened. I never knew what. No one knows. Only the two of them. And the colonel's wife, she knew what happened. Your father did something, or the colonel did something, or both did. I don't know. But the result was that the friendship ended. They became enemies, never spoke again. And shortly after, the colonel's wife died. Does he blame your father? Does he blame himself? Both. I have no idea. But since then, he closed himself off, became this man you know now, hard, silent, alone." Marianne felt her head spin. "And when my father died, the colonel knew. Everyone knew. The bankruptcy, the debts, everything. And he did nothing. For months, he did nothing. I thought he was going to let it go, that the anger was stronger. But then you were auctioned. And on that day, when he came back home afterward, I had never seen him like that. He was shaking, crying, punching the study table, screaming alone, as if something had broken inside him or fixed." "I don't know." Hattie held Marianne's hands. "What I know is that he brought you here not to punish you, not to use you, but to protect you, to honor something he owes, or that your father owed, or both. It's complicated, girl, and I know it's unfair for you to be in the middle of all this without understanding. But I swear on my life that you are safe here. The colonel is many things, but he isn't evil. He's just broken. Marianne felt tears burn, but didn't let them fall. I want to know the truth, all of it. Then you'll have to ask him. But choose the moment well, because there are things that once said cannot be undone. That night, Marianne couldn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, watching shadows dance with the moonlight coming through the window. Down below, the footsteps again, back and forth, relentless, and she made a decision. She got up, put a shawl over her nightgown, went down the stairs slowly so as not to make noise. The hallway was dark, only weak light leaking from under the study door. She stopped there, hand raised, about to knock, hesitated, and then she heard weeping, low, muffled, but unmistakable. A man crying, alone, in the dark. Marianne rested her forehead against the door and whispered, so low that even she didn't know if she had really spoken. What pain is this that you carry? On the other side, silence. The footsteps stopped. Did he hear? She waited. A minute, two. Then the voice came, also low, hoarse, broken. The same as you. Loss. Guilt. And the question that won't go silent. Could it have been different? Marianne closed her eyes. I don't know. Neither do I. Silence again. But it was a different silence. No longer hostile. No longer distant. It was a shared silence. Of two people, separated by a wooden door, but united by similar pains. Good night, Miss Marianne. Good night, Colonel August. She went back up to her room, and for the first time since she arrived, she slept. Not well, but she slept. The following days brought small changes. The Colonel began to appear more. Not much, but more. He passed through the kitchen sometimes, got a glass of water, nodded. Other times, Marianne saw him through the window, walking through the fields, hands behind his back, head down, thoughtful. And one afternoon, he did something no one expected. He knocked on her bedroom door. Marianne opened it, surprised. He was there with a package in his hands. This is for you, and extended it. She took it, slowly, opened it. Inside were 3 dresses, new, pretty, of good fabric. One blue, one green, one wine-colored. I can't accept this. You can. You need decent clothes. It's not a favor. It's my obligation. But, Marianne, he spoke her name. The first time he spoke like that, without the miss. Please, let me do this. Let me fix at least one small thing. She looked into his eyes and saw pleading. A powerful, rich, respected man pleading for her to accept a gift. How could she refuse? Thank you, she whispered. He nodded and turned to leave. But she called out, Colonel? He stopped. Did you love her? Your wife? The question slipped out before Marianne could think. Bold, invasive. But she needed to know. Needed to understand who that man was. The Colonel didn't turn around, kept his back to her, and replied, his voice so low Marianne almost didn't hear. With every piece of my soul, and when she died, I died too. What you see here isn't me. It's just the ghost of who I was. I'm sorry. Me too. And he went down the stairs, leaving Marianne there, holding the dresses, feeling the weight of that sadness that wasn't just his, but now hers too. Because it was impossible to be in that house, know that man, and not feel, not care. She didn't want to care. She wanted to hate him, wanted to blame him. It was easier that way. But the truth, difficult and inconvenient, was that she was beginning to see not the man who had bought her, but the broken man trying to fix something that perhaps could never be fixed. The following week, during dinner in the kitchen, Marianne and Hattie ate together while the Colonel ate alone in the study. Joshua entered, hat in hands, face worried. "Hattie, the colonel wants to speak to the girl." Marianne stood up, wiped her hands on her apron, and followed Joshua to the study. Knocked 3 times. "Enter." She entered. The colonel was standing by the window, looking out into the night. He didn't turn when she entered. "Close the door." She closed it. "Sit." She sat. He finally turned, and what Marianne saw on his face scared her. Not anger, not sadness, but decision. As if he had made a difficult resolution. "I'm going to tell you the truth, or at least part of it, because you deserve to know, and because I can't stand carrying this alone anymore." Marianne's heart raced. I want to listen." He sat in the chair behind the desk, ran his hands over his face, and began. "Your father and I were friends, best friends. We grew up together. And when I met Helen, my wife, I brought her to meet him. And your father was against it. Said she wasn't for me, that there was something wrong. He didn't explain what, just said I shouldn't marry. We fought, badly. I married anyway." Marianne barely breathed. Helen was beautiful. Intelligent, but fragile. Always was. And 6 months after the wedding, she got sick. Coughing blood. High fever. The doctors didn't know what. Your father showed up one night, drunk, crying, and confessed. Confessed what? The colonel closed his eyes. That he and Helen had been in love before. That they broke up because the families didn't approve. And that she was sick because she had tried to get rid of a child. A child that wasn't mine. It was his. The silence that fell was absolute. Marianne felt the world spin. I didn't believe it. Didn't want to believe it. Confronted Helen. She confirmed everything. Said she loved me, but that she had never stopped loving him either. That the child was from before the wedding, but she had discovered it only after. And that she was afraid I would find out, so she did what she did, and almost died in the process. "My God," Marianne whispered, "your father begged me. Said he would go away, would never come back, that I could stay with Helen, try to fix it. And I forgave her. Forgave her, sent him away, and tried to save my marriage. But Helen never recovered. The body healed, but the guilt killed her. 2 years later, she was gone. And I stayed, hating your father, hating her, but above all, hating myself for forgiving, for having been weak." Marianne had tears running down now. "And that's why you bought me? Because of that? I bought you because when I saw you on that platform, I saw her, Helen, the same age, the same despair in the eyes. And I realized that if I left you there, if I let you be bought by any of those men, I would be killing Helen again. And I couldn't, not anymore. So I saved you, or tried to save. I don't know if I succeeded." He stood up, walked to the shelf, and took out a wooden box, opened it, and took out an old, faded photo, handed it to Marianne. "This is Helen." Marianne looked, and the shock was physical. The woman in the photo had her eyes, her face shape, her hair. They weren't identical, but the resemblance was undeniable. "That's why," Marianne whispered. "That's why you look at me that way. Forgive me," he said, and his voice failed. "Forgive me for putting you in this. Forgive me for not telling you sooner. Forgive me for being so selfish as to try to fix my past using your present." Marianne held the photo tightly, looked at that woman who died so long ago but somehow had shaped her destiny. And then She looked at the man in front of her. Colonel August. Not a monster anymore. Not a buyer anymore. But a man. Just a man. Broken. Regretful. Trying. "I don't know if I can forgive," she said, honest. "Not yet. But I understand. And that's already something, isn't it?" He nodded, eyes shining. "It's more than I deserve." She stood up, returned the photo, and at the door, before leaving, turned. "Colonel, she would have forgiven you. Helen, for what happened. She would have. How do you know? Because those who truly love forgive. Always." And she left, leaving him there, alone again, but perhaps a little less heavy. This person deserves justice. Comment justice for Helen if you think this story deserves to be remembered. That night, Marianne opened the trunk in her room for the first time. Inside, there were old clothes. Women's dresses. Delicate, well-preserved. Helen's dresses. That was what Hattie was keeping. That was why the clothes they gave her fit so well. Because she was living not only in a ghost's house, but wearing her clothes. And in some strange way, impossible to explain, carrying her legacy. The months that followed brought a routine that was strange, but not uncomfortable. Marianne and Colonel August developed a kind of silent truce. He remained closed off, distant. But now there were moments, small, fleeting, when they talked. About the weather, about the harvest, about the books she saw on the study shelf, and which he, without her asking, began leaving on the small table in her room. Classic literature, poetry, even a volume of poems that had worn pages from being read so much. "Helen liked this one," he said one night, when he caught Marianne reading the book on the porch. She memorized the poems, recited them while tending the flowers. Marianne closed the book slowly. "Do you still have her flowers? The front garden?" "It's abandoned. I can't take care of it." "Can I try?" The words came out before she thought. "Restore it? If you let me?" He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "You can." And so Marianne began spending afternoons, when the housework was done, kneeling in the front garden, pulling weeds, pruning the wild roses, cleaning the fountain. Joshua helped her sometimes, bringing good soil, fertilizer, new saplings. And gradually, the garden came back to life. The roses bloomed, white, red, yellow. The fountain gushed clean, fresh water again. One afternoon, when Marianne was watering the flowers, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw the colonel standing on the porch, looking at the garden. His face had an expression she had never seen before. It wasn't exactly happiness, but it was something close to it. Relief, peace, a gentle longing instead of a painful one. "It's beautiful," he said, voice hoarse, "like it was before. I tried to follow what I imagined she would do. You succeeded." He descended the steps, walked to one of the rose bushes, lightly touched a white flower. These were her favorites, white roses. She said they were pure, honest, that they hid nothing. Marianne put down the watering can. "Can I ask you a question?" "You can. Do you hate my father?" The question hung in the air like smoke. The colonel didn't answer immediately, kept looking at the rose. Then, "I thought I hated him, spent 30 years thinking that. But the truth? I don't know. Because he did what he did, hide the truth, get involved with Helen. But he also did what he did, confessed, left her with me, tried to fix it. And I never could decide if that was honor or cowardice. And now, after he died, now I know that hate is too exhausting, and that carrying it changes nothing, brings no one back, doesn't fix the past." He finally looked at Marianne. "Your father wasn't a bad man. He was weak, human, like me, like everyone. Marianne felt something loosen inside her chest. For months, she carried anger at her father. For the bankruptcy, for the gambling, for the humiliation. But hearing that, coming from someone who had every reason to hate him, was liberating. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not making me hate him too." The colonel nodded, and for the first time, Marianne saw something that could almost be a smile on the corner of his lips. It didn't quite form, but it was close. "Come, I want to show you something." She followed him inside the house, up the stairs. He stopped in front of one of the locked doors. Those Hattie had forbidden Marianne to open. Took a key from his pocket, unlocked it, pushed the door. The room on the other side was frozen in time. A double bed with a white lace canopy, a dressing table with an oval mirror, silver brushes, perfume bottles still half full, clothes hanging in the ajar wardrobe, everything covered by a thin layer of dust, but preserved, untouched. "Helen's room," Marianne whispered. "I locked it the day she died, and never entered again." Until today. He walked to the dressing table, picked up one of the bottles, opened it, smelled it, closed his eyes. Still has her scent, after 22 years. Marianne approached slowly, with reverence, like someone entering a church. There was a photo on the bedside table. Helen and the colonel on their wedding day. She in white, smiling, delicate. He young, tall, eyes full of light, that now no longer existed. "Were you happy?" "For 6 months, before the truth came out. Yes, we were." He put the bottle back. "After, we tried to be. But lies build nothing, and the truth had appeared too late." From his jacket pocket, he took a yellowed envelope, extended it to Marianne. This is why I brought you here today. You need to read it." Marianne took the envelope with trembling hands. "What is it?" "A letter, from Helen, written 3 days before she died, to be delivered to someone, but I never delivered it." "Because it was for," he stopped, swallowed hard. "It was for your mother, for Mama Caroline." The world stopped. "What?" "Read, then you will understand everything." Finally, he left the room, closed the door behind him, leaving Marianne alone. She looked at the envelope. The seal was broken, but the letter inside was intact. Thin paper, delicate, slanted handwriting. Marianne sat on the edge of the bed and began to read. "My dearest Caroline, if you are reading this, it is because I have already departed, and I need to tell you the truth before I go, because I cannot carry this weight to wherever I am going. You were always my best friend, since we were girls. Do you remember? Running through the fields, stealing sweets from the kitchen, laughing at everything. And when we became young women, when you met Anthony and fell in love, I was so happy for you. But I didn't tell you. Didn't tell you that Anthony and I had known each other before, that we had loved each other, that he asked me to marry him and my family refused because you didn't have enough land, didn't have enough name. And I, coward that I always was, accepted their decision. Let him go. And then he met you, and you fell in love. And I died of jealousy, but said nothing, because I had no right. I who had given him up. I who chose security instead of love. And when I met August, I thought, this is my fresh start. And he was good, is good. But Caroline, my heart never forgot Anthony. And in a week night, before my wedding, Key and I met. One last time, he said, to say goodbye. And what shouldn't have happened, happened. And I got pregnant. The child was his. But I was already promised to August. I panicked, didn't know what to do. I resorted to a midwife who did that which one shouldn't do. And I almost died. August discovered everything. Anthony confessed, and my life became this hell of guilt that never ends. But Caroline, I need you to know, Anthony loved you. He told me. That night, he said you were the best thing that had ever happened to him. That what happened between us was the ghost of a past that should have stayed buried. He went back to you, chose you, and you had a beautiful daughter, Marianne. I knew when she was born, and I was happy for you, truly. But now, I need to ask you something. If someday Anthony fails, if someday he falls, if someday Marianne needs help and has no one, seek out August, because I will ask him, on my deathbed, to promise to take care, to promise to protect the daughter of the man I loved and the woman who was my best friend, even without knowing anything. Forgive me, Caroline, for everything, for the betrayal of friendship, for the secrets, for not being strong enough to be honest. Your eternal friend, even if unworthy, Helen. Marianne read the letter 3 times. 4. Her hand shook so much the paper fluttered. The tears blurred the last lines. Everything made sense now. Everything. The absurd bid at the auction. The protection. The kindness. The money for her mother. The dresses. The garden. It wasn't just guilt. It wasn't just debt to the father. It was a promise made to a dying woman, to take care of the daughter of the man she loved. Marianne stood up, pressing the letter against her chest. She left the room, ran down the stairs. The colonel was in the study, back to the door, looking out the window. She entered without knocking. "You promised her," Marianne said, voice choked. "Promised to take care of me." He didn't turn. "I promised. That's why you bought me. Not for me, for her. In the beginning, yes." He finally turned. His eyes were red. "But now it's for you too, because you aren't just Anthony's daughter. You aren't just Helen's image. You are Marianne, and Marianne deserves to be saved for herself." Marianne felt the floor vanish beneath her feet. All the anger, all the confusion, all the pain of the last months exploded at once. "I didn't want to be saved like this," she screamed, and her voice echoed through the whole house. "I didn't want to be bought, to be property, to be part of your guilt and your debt to ghosts. I just wanted to have a normal life." The colonel didn't respond, just stood there, receiving every word as if they were lashes. And maybe they were. "And the worst part," Marianne continued, tears running free now, "the worst part is that I started to care. Started to see you not as a monster, but as a person. Started to feel. She couldn't finish, couldn't even admit to herself what she was feeling. "I know," he said softly. "Me too." The silence that fell was broken by the sound of horses outside. Many horses, voices shouting. Marianne and the colonel exchanged looks. He passed her, left the study, crossed the living room to the porch. Marianne followed him. In front of the house, a group of men was dismounting. 10, maybe 12. All armed, rifles, machetes. In front, a man Marianne recognized. Tanner, the same one who had smiled crookedly in the square on the day of the auction. "August!" he shouted. "We need to talk." Colonel August descended the steps, stopped in front of the group. Marianne stayed on the porch, heart racing. Hattie and Joshua appeared from the back, also frightened. "What do you want here, Tanner?" The colonel's voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "Came to get what is mine. Nothing here is yours. The girl is." Tanner spat on the ground. "You rigged the auction. Paid an absurd amount to prevent us, legitimate buyers, from having a chance. The magistrate is being investigated, and the agreement can be annulled. And when it is, I'm going to make a new bid. And this time, you won't interfere. Marianne felt her blood freeze. "No," she whispered. The colonel took a step forward. "You won't lay a finger on her." "Who's going to stop me? You?" Tanner laughed, and the men behind him laughed too. "You are one. We are 12, and we are armed. Now move and let me take the girl. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." "Then it will be the hard way." The colonel didn't move. Tanner made a signal. 2 men advanced. The colonel went at them. A punch to the first, an elbow to the second. But there were too many. Soon he was on the ground, being kicked, blood running from his nose and mouth. "No!" Marianne screamed, running down the steps. "Stop!" "Stop it!" Tanner grabbed her by the arm, pulled hard. "Shut your mouth, girl. You're coming with me now." She struggled, scratching, biting, but he was too strong. He began to drag her toward the horses. The colonel tried to get up, but was kicked again, falling. And that was when the shot echoed. Everyone stopped, froze. Hattie was on the porch, with an old rifle, smoking, pointed upwards. "The next one," she said, voice steady as rock, "won't be in the air." Tanner let go of Marianne. "You don't have the guts, old woman." "Try me." Hattie descended a step. "Lived 60 years on this land. Buried a husband, buried children, buried bosses. And I'm not afraid of dying. But you are afraid. I see it in your eyes. So get on that horse and get out of here before I change my mind and send you to hell where you belong. If you are moved by this twist, leave a like now." The story is reaching its most intense moment. For a moment it seemed Tanner would advance. But then he looked at the rifle, at Hattie, at his own men who were starting to back away, and spat on the ground again. "This isn't over. We will come back, with the law, and then no rifle will hold us back." He mounted his horse, pulled the reins violently, and galloped off. The men followed him, raising dust. Silence returned, except for the colonel's groans on the ground. Thank you for listening. See you again soon. Marianne ran to him, knelt beside him. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" He spat blood. I've had worse." Joshua helped lift him. Marianne held the other arm. Together, they took the colonel back inside, to the living room sofa. Hattie brought water, clean cloths, began to clean the wounds. A nasty cut on the eyebrow, split lip, ribs sore but not broken. "They will come back," Joshua said, somberly. "And next time, they'll bring more people." "I know," the colonel murmured, then groaned when Hattie pressed the cloth to the cut. "So what do we do?" Marianne asked, desperate. The colonel looked at her, and in his eyes, Marianne saw decision. "I'm going to set you free." "What?" "The agreement. I'm going to tear it up. I'm going to declare you free, and I'm going to give you enough money for you and your mother to go away, far away, where these men can't find you." "No," Marianne said, firmly. "Marianne, I said no." She held his hand, that large, calloused hand that trembled on the day of the auction. "I'm not going to run, and you aren't going to send me away just to protect me. Because if I go, you stay alone again, and I can't. I don't want to." "What?" he whispered. "You don't want what?" "To leave you." The words came out broken, honest, terrifying. "I don't want to leave you." The colonel closed his eyes. A tear slipped out. "You don't know what you're saying." I know perfectly well." Marianne squeezed his hand tighter. "You kept a secret your whole life, carried guilt that wasn't yours, kept a promise to a woman who hurt you, but whom you still loved. And now you're willing to release me, even knowing it will destroy you again. Because that's what you do, sacrifice yourself. And I won't let you do that again." "Marianne." His voice was just air now. "I don't deserve this. Nobody deserves anything in this life. We only have what we choose to grab. She looked into his eyes, those dark, tired eyes, but which now had a different shine. Hope, fear, love, all mixed. And I choose to stay, even knowing it could be dangerous, especially because of that. Hattie sniffled behind them. When Marianne looked, she saw the older woman wiping tears with the back of her hand. "You two are too stubborn for your own good," she grumbled. But she was smiling. That night, the colonel asked Marianne to stay in the study. He went to the trunk in the corner, the one she saw but never dared open, unlocked it. From inside, he took a metal box, opened it, and Marianne saw stacks of papers, documents, letters. "These are the records," he said, "of everything. The auction, your father's debts, the agreement, and also," he took out another envelope, "Helen's death certificate, and with it a declaration I wrote but never registered, assuming responsibility for the child she lost, confessing my role in what happened. Why did you never register it? Because I was a coward, because I was afraid of the shame, of the judgment. But now," he extended everything to Marianne. "Now you decide what to do with this. Burn it? Keep it. Use it against me, whatever you want, because the truth shouldn't be locked in a trunk. It should be in the world, and the consequences I accept." Marianne looked at the papers, at the naked truth there in black and white, and then, slowly, she put everything back in the box, closed it. "The truth isn't mine to reveal. It's yours, and Helen's, and my father's. But the future," she looked into his eyes, "the future we build together." Together? Together. And there, in that office, full of books and secrets and ghosts, something changed. The air became lighter, the weight a little less, and for the first time in 22 years, Colonel August Stone smiled. Truly, a small, broken smile, but real. And Marianne smiled back, because sometimes justice doesn't come from judgments or revenge. It comes from forgiveness, from choices, from two broken people deciding to fix themselves together. Which part of this story touched your heart the most? Comment down below. The days following the invasion by Tanner and his men were tense. Colonel August sent Joshua to get help. Two nephews who worked on a neighboring farm came to stay at St. Helen, armed, taking turns standing guard day and night. Marianne barely slept, startled by any noise, imagining horses arriving, men invading, everything collapsing again. But the weeks passed, and nothing happened. It was Hattie who brought the news, returning from the market one morning in April. She entered the kitchen where Marianne was preparing lunch, dropped the shopping basket on the table, and blurted out, "Tanner was arrested." Marianne dropped the spoon she was holding. "What? Arrested?" The daughter of a family in the next valley reported him. Said she had been forced to, well, you understand. And it wasn't just her. 3 other girls came forward afterward. The sheriff had no choice. Took him away in handcuffs yesterday morning. They say he'll get years in jail. The relief Marianne felt was so intense her legs wobbled. She leaned on the table, breathing deeply. So it's over. He won't anymore. He won't do anything anymore. Hattie took her hand and squeezed. "You're safe, girl. Truly now." When the colonel found out, that night, he said nothing. He just nodded, as if he already knew that justice, in one way or another, always found its way. But Marianne saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in a long time. Peace. Not complete. Perhaps it never would be complete, but a beginning of peace. May arrived, bringing the first morning frosts. The fields were ready for harvest. The colonel hired temporary workers from the surroundings, and the farm gained life like Marianne had not yet seen. Voices in the fields, laughter at lunchtime, the smell of crops being processed in the yard. One morning, while Marianne was watering the roses in the garden, now completely recovered, a sea of colors and scents. The colonel appeared beside her. He had a sealed letter in his hands. "This arrived for you," he said, extending it. Marianne recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from her mother. With trembling hands, she opened and read, "My dear daughter, the doctor the colonel sent is a miracle. I don't know what medicines these are that he brought, but I am feeling better than in years. The cough has almost vanished. I can walk around the house without losing my breath. Mrs. Inez says I have more color in my face. Marianne, I know you are there out of obligation, out of debt, because of this terrible agreement life imposed on us. But in your letters, I read something different. You don't write with anger anymore. You write with care, even affection. You tell me about the garden, about the books, about how that man isn't the monster we imagined. Daughter, I need to tell you something I carried for a long time. I knew Helen. We were friends, good friends, and when she died, I knew, not everything, but I knew there were secrets between her, your father, and Colonel August. Your father never wanted to speak, took it all to the grave, but I always knew there was more than he told. And now, knowing it was the Colonel who saved you, who is taking care of you and me, I understand. I understand he is paying a debt, and maybe, if you can forgive, if you can see beyond the pain, you will find not a jailer, but an ally. Maybe even something more. My blessing is with you, always. Make your choices with a free heart, not with the chain of the past. Your mother who loves you, Caroline." Marianne had to sit on the stone bench next to the fountain. The tears came, but they were different. Not of sadness, of liberation. Her mother knew, understood, and blessed. The colonel who had stepped away to give privacy approached slowly. Bad news? No. Marianne wiped her face and looked at him. Good, very good. He sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. They stayed there in silence, listening to the water of the fountain, the song of the birds, the wind in the trees. It was a comfortable silence now, no longer heavy or awkward. "Marianne," he said finally, voice low, "I want to make you a proposal." She turned her head, curious. "The agreement we made, it binds you here for 10 years. But I want to annul that, officially. I'm going to register at the courthouse that the debt is settled, that you are free. You can leave whenever you want. Take your mother. Start over somewhere else. I'll give you enough money for that." Marianne's heart tightened. You want me to leave? No. The answer came fast, almost desperate. "It's not that, but I can't keep you here chained by a paper. If you stay, it needs to be because you want to, because you choose, not because you are forced." Marianne looked at his hands, large, calloused, trembling slightly. She extended her own hand and touched his. He startled at the contact, but didn't pull away. "And if I choose to stay?" she asked, voice almost a whisper. "Not for the 10 years of the paper, not for debt, but because I want to." He turned his face and looked her in the eyes. "Why? Why would you want that?" "Because here I found something I didn't have anymore. Purpose, peace." And she took a deep breath, gathering courage. "And someone who understands me, someone who is also broken. And maybe 2 broken people together can fix themselves. Marianne, I am 30 years older than you. I am a finished man, full of past, of ghosts. And I'm a woman who was sold in a public square, daughter of a bankrupt gambler, with a sick mother and no future." She squeezed his hand. "We don't choose how life breaks us, but we choose how we rebuild. And I choose this. I choose you. I choose here." The colonel closed his eyes. A tear slipped out. "Are you sure?" "Absolute." And there, in the garden they had rebuilt together, among the white roses Helen loved and that now bloomed again, Colonel August Stone kissed Marianne Miller's hand. a gentle, reverent kiss, full of silent promise. "Then stay," he whispered, "not as a maid, not as debt payment, but as whatever you want to be." "And what can I be?" He smiled, that broken but real smile. "Mistress of this house, of this estate, of my crooked heart, if you want. I want." The following months transformed everything. The colonel went to the courthouse and officially annulled the contract, declaring Marianne free of any obligation. But she didn't leave. She stayed. And gradually, the house began to change. The windows that lived closed were opened, letting sun and fresh air in. The locked rooms were opened and cleaned. Helen's room, which had been a mausoleum for 22 years, was carefully emptied. Clothes donated to poor girls in town. Perfumes given to Hattie. Furniture redistributed around the house. Only the wedding photo stayed, now in the living room, no longer hidden, but honored. Because Helen had been part of the history. But she was no longer a prison. Mama Caroline improved so much that in August, she could make the trip to the estate. Marianne received her on the porch steps, and the two embraced and cried and laughed at the same time. The colonel stood a bit behind, kind of awkward, but Mama Caroline approached him, held his hands, and said simply, "Thank you for taking care of my girl. Helen would be happy to know." And he, for the first time in decades, didn't look away when Helen's name was spoken, just nodded. Mama Caroline stayed a month, and in that month, Marianne saw her mother return to being who she was before, telling stories, laughing in the kitchen with Hattie, helping in the garden, sitting on the porch on sunny afternoons with a cup of coffee and a sigh of contentment. When the time came for her to return to town, because she didn't want to be a burden, she said, had friends there, had her life. It was with the promise of frequent visits, and with a tight hug for the colonel. "Take care of her," Mama Caroline whispered, "as I know you will." "I will," he promised, "with my life." September brought spring, and with it, changes no one expected. On a Saturday morning, the colonel called Marianne into the study. She entered and found him standing by the desk, wearing not work clothes, but a dark suit, beard well trimmed, hair combed. He looked young. Not actually young, but lighter, as if he had taken 10 years off him. "There is something I want to ask you," he said, and his voice trembled a little. Marianne felt her heart accelerate. "What?" He approached, held her hands. "Marianne Miller, you have already given me more than I deserved. Gave me forgiveness when I only deserved judgment. Gave me company when I had chosen solitude. Gave me hope when I had given up on it. And now I want to give you something back." From his jacket pocket, he took a small box, opened it. Inside, a ring. Simple, gold, with a small red ruby. "This ring belonged to my mother, and her mother. And now, if you accept, I want it to be yours, not as a symbol of contract or obligation, but as a promise of love, of partnership, of future." He knelt and his dark eyes shone. "Marry me? For real? By choice? Not by paper?" Marianne covered her mouth with her hands. Tears flowed freely. Are you sure? People will talk, will say that. I don't care what they will say. I only care what you will say. So, yes or no?" She pulled him up, threw her arms around his neck, and whispered in his ear, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." And he hugged her with a strength that seemed to want to protect her from the whole world. And maybe he could. The wedding was small, simple, in the estate chapel that hadn't been used in years. Father Anselm, who had known the colonel since he was a boy, officiated with tears in his eyes. Hattie was the maid of honor. Joshua, the best man. Mama Caroline came from town, wearing a pretty blue dress the colonel had ordered made, and half a dozen neighbors and farm workers completed the guests. Marianne wore a simple white dress sewn by herself with lace Hattie had kept for decades. No veil, no pomp, just her and the truth. And when the colonel, no, when August saw her entering the chapel, he cried openly, without hiding, without shame. And when they exchanged vows, when he said, "I do," and she said, "I do," it was as if the entire estate breathed together, as if even the ghosts had sighed relieved and finally departed to where they needed to be. The kiss was gentle, shy even, but loaded with promise. And when they left the chapel as husband and wife, the bells rang. Joshua and one of the nephews pulled the ropes with strength, and the sound echoed through the hills, announcing not only a wedding, but a new beginning. The party was on the porch of the main house. Hattie had cooked for 3 days: roast pig, fried chicken, rice, beans, cornbread that came out steaming from the batches, and a 3-tiered cake she swore she had learned to make when young and never had a reason to make again. Until now. There was music. Joshua played the guitar, and a neighbor played the accordion, and dancing, and laughter, and games. And for the first time in 22 years, that house knew joy. When night fell and the guests left, Marianne and August remained alone on the porch. He had taken off his jacket, tie, shirt sleeves rolled up. She had taken off the tight shoes and let down her hair that was pinned up. They sat on the wooden bench, looking at the stars that seemed brighter than ever. "Do you think she would have approved?" August asked softly. Marianne knew who he was talking about. "Helen? Yes, I think so. I think she wanted you to be happy. To stop punishing yourself." "And your father?" Marianne thought. "My father. I think he would be surprised, but deep down, I think he would be relieved, knowing he fulfilled his role, even crooked, even wrong. Because in the end, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm happy." The last word came out with surprise, as if she herself had only realized now. August held her hand, interlaced fingers. "Me too, happy. For the first time in so long, I didn't even remember what it was like." They stayed there until late, talking about plans, about bringing Mama Caroline permanently to the farm, about maybe, one day, having children. "If God wills, and if it's not too late for me," he said with a crooked smile. About expanding the plantation, about traveling, maybe, seeing the big city that Marianne only saw in photos. About the future, always about the future, never again about the past. When they went up to the room, the master bedroom, which had been prepared and decorated as new, without ghosts, only promises, Marianne stopped at the door. "August? Yes? Thank you for everything, for not leaving me there in that square, for keeping your promise, for giving me a chance to start over." He touched her face gently. "I'm the one who thanks you, for choosing to stay, for choosing to believe, for giving me a reason to live again." And that night, the ghosts finally left that house. Helen rested in peace. Marianne's father found forgiveness, and 2 broken souls began slowly to glue themselves back together. The years that followed brought more transformations than Marianne could ever have imagined on that terrible morning of March 1947, when she climbed onto a wooden platform in the square of St. John. In 1949, the first son was born, Anthony August Stone Miller. A name that carried both fathers, both pasts, now united. The boy had the colonel's dark eyes and Marianne's easy smile. And when August held him for the first time, trembling with fear and joy, Marianne knew the healing was complete. In 1951 came the girl, Helen Caroline, a tribute to the two women who, each in her own way, had shaped that story. The girl was smart, talkative, full of life, and Hattie, already older, spent her days rocking the child and telling stories of the farm, of the old days, but now with a happy ending. Mama Caroline moved permanently to St. Helen in 1950, occupying one of the rooms that had been closed for so long. She and Hattie became inseparable, two old friends taking care of the house, the grandchildren, each other. And when Mama Caroline died in 1956, sleeping peacefully on a summer afternoon, it was August who buried her in the estate cemetery, beside where one day he would be buried too. "Because she is part of this family," he said, "she always was." The estate prospered. August, with Mary Ann's help, who had a good head for numbers and administration, expanded production, modernized the processing, and St. Helen became one of the most respected farms in the region. But more than that, it became a place of joy, of open doors, of harvest festivals where half the town showed up, of masses in the chapel on Sundays, of life. In 1960, on an April morning, similar to that of the wedding, August had a heart attack while walking through the fields he loved so much. It was quick, painless. Joshua found him lying under an oak tree, eyes closed, almost smiling. He was 63. Mary Ann cried a lot, but not with despair. She cried with gratitude for every day they had together, for every conversation, for every smile torn from that man who had forgotten how to smile. For having transformed 10 years of debt into 13 years of true love. At the funeral, half of St. John appeared, and many commented, surprised, how Colonel August Stone had changed in recent years, how he had opened up, how he had returned to living. It was Mary Ann, they said. She saved him. But Mary Ann knew the truth. They had saved each other. Years later, when Mary Ann was already an old lady with gray hair, sitting on the same porch where she had watered roses and made promises, her grandchildren around asking for stories, she told. She told about the square, about the auction, about the man with the trembling hand who paid $50,000, about hidden letters and old promises, about revived gardens and mended hearts. "And did you love each other, Grandma?" the youngest grandson always asked, and Mary Ann smiled. That smile that had lines around it, but still carried the light of the 19-year-old girl. "We loved, in our own way. It wasn't the love of romantic books. It was better. It was real. It was chosen. And that, my love, is worth more than any fairy tale." And at night, when the house went silent and Mary Ann went up to the room that had been theirs, she still felt it, August's presence, not as a ghost, but as a good memory, as gratitude, as the certainty that she had made the right choices, that she had stayed when she could have gone, that she had loved when she could have hated, that she had built a future when the past insisted on binding. She would open the trunk, the same one she had discovered in the first month, and take out the dress she had worn at the wedding. It still smelled of lavender and hope. She stored it back carefully, and then she picked up the photo of the two of them on the wedding day, her smiling openly, him with that broken but real smile, united, happy. "Thank you," she whispered to the photo, "for saving me, for loving me, for giving me a life I didn't even know I could have." And from somewhere beyond what eyes could see, Mary Ann knew he heard, and that Helen heard too, and that her father heard, and that everyone, each in their own way, was at peace. Because that is the truth about redemption. It doesn't erase the past. It doesn't pretend pain didn't exist. but it rebuilds, gives meaning, transforms scars into marks of survival, transforms auctions into weddings, transforms debts into love, transforms endings into new beginnings. And when Mary Ann Miller Stone died in 1985, at 57 years old, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, in the same house where she had arrived as property and left as mistress, her last word was whispered with a smile: "I chose well." And she truly had. If this story touched your heart, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share with whoever needs to hear about forgiveness, new beginnings, and true love. And click on the next video to meet another emotional story from the countryside that will make you cry and smile at the same time. What did you think of this story? Comment down below which part moved you the most.